Welcome, everyone, to the Spiritual Brew Pub. I'm your host, Michael Camp, and I'm really excited that Leslie Nease is joining us today. Leslie is a life and faith transition coach and the host of the Honoring the Journey podcast. Leslie, welcome to the Spiritual Brew Pub.
Well, thank you. It's so exciting to be here. We had such a great conversation when I had you on my podcast. I'm so
That's
excited to do
right.
it
I've
again.
been on yours, and now you're on mine. We're
Yes,
returning the favor. So
absolutely.
you've got a really interesting background that we're going to talk about. And one of the reasons why I wanted you on the podcast is because, I love your podcast. Your co-host, Leslie Schock, I met her last year, and I heard your story, and you've got a lot of a background in evangelicalism, uh, Christian radio. You were a contestant on the Survivor China Castaway
Yes.
show back in the day.
So you're not
And
a Survivor fan, Michael. Did you not?
well, I have watched it before. Yes, I have watched it before. I'll tell you a funny story. I think it was the very first one that
Mhm,
they had. The very
mhm.
first one. I remember that one.
2000, the year
Yeah, and
2000.
the
Yep.
guy from Rhode Island won, and so my
Richard
my
Hatch.
my son and his friends were watching it, a rerun, and they were watching it, and I walk in the living room and go, "Oh, you're watching the original Survivor show," and I point at the guy who wins. He wins, and they're
Oh
like, "Dad,
no.
you ruined it."
You mean there's people in the world that don't know who won? Oh my word. No, it's
Right.
funny. I love the show. I've always loved it. So,
Yeah,
I actually the first few times I watched it, I was like, who in their right mind would do this on purpose? It made zero sense to me. But
I see.
yeah, then I got the bug.
I
So
see. But it says you're best known for refusing to finish the Buddhist welcoming ceremony due to your Christian beliefs. Is that
mhm.
true?
It is so true. Yeah, they definitely cast me because I was like a super strong Christian. I had been fully surrendered, I guess you could say, to Jesus Christ. If you know what that means in evangelical circles, it means you give your complete life to him and just renounce everything and go
Right.
forward. And it was a big deal. I was on Christian radio, so I think they knew when they cast me, they were like, she's not going to do this Buddhist ceremony and this is going to be great. And so, yeah, and I
They
didn't.
they set you up for it. I
They
see.
totally
Okay.
did. Well, and they exploited me, which is fine. I
Yeah.
mean,
Right.
yeah, I definitely, I walked out, but I did very respectfully walked out. I did not make a scene and act like a jerk. And it was a personal decision. Of course I got called out, and then Jeff was like, we said it wasn't a, worship ceremony, although they had us literally bowing before the statue. But I think there was so much fear in my heart as an evangelical of, hurting God or making him look bad or, giving the wrong impression. I mean, it's all about
It's true.
how
Yeah, it's
things
very
look,
true. It's very
So,
fear-based. Yeah, you're
and I
afraid
was
to do
like,
something like that, right.
I was so afraid.
Like,
And,
open yourself up to evil spirits or something, right?
and that's what you're told would happen. And
Right.
so, it was the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego moment for Leslie, I guess.
I see.
I couldn't bow. They made, kind of a big deal about it. But the funny thing is, somebody else didn't bow either. He was the professional poker player from Las
Oh, he didn't.
Vegas.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
no, he didn't bow either, but they didn't show it. And
Oh
then when
oh,
Jeff asked him first, he said, "Why did you walk out?" And John Rivera was like, "I don't know. I'm just not religious. It was weird." And
yeah,
then
right.
they came to me and he
Yeah,
said, "So why'd you walk out?" I said, "Well, I'm not religious either, but I have a relationship with Jesus Christ and I'm only going to put
yeah,
my face on the floor for him." That's what I said. And they
yeah.
took out the either. And so I'm just like randomly saying, I'm not religious, but I have a relationship with Jesus Christ. And so I got just slammed by the Survivor community for that. What do you mean you're not religious? You're a Christian radio host and blah, 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 blah. You know,
Yeah, I know.
so
We were taught to say that. "We're
we
not religious.
were.
We have a
It's a
relationship."
relationship, although
Yeah,
I can tell you I was quite religious
yeah,
at the
I
time
know.
in
It's kinda
retrospect.
it's double speak is what it is, but so anyways, you've got this amazing background. I think you were in 3 different radio stations, including a Billy Graham station and another one called His Radio, and we you can share about that later, but,
Yeah.
um, I wanted to start off by hearing what's your background and your story. I mean, well, you're already starting to tell it, but what is
Mhm.
your religious background growing up? And, how did you get into evangelicalism?
Well, I think, growing up, my mom was a single mom for a while. And while she was a single mom, we had never really been to church, didn't know anything about it really. But they had this vacation Bible school when I was like 7. And it was at the school that I went to, and so it was very familiar. And yet the message was very different than I had ever heard. It's the first time I heard, I have a father named God, and he has a son named Jesus, and if you believe in him, you won't go to hell. And so I heard about hell and I heard about Satan, and the fear started then. You know what I mean? Like the fear
Right.
of Satan's going to get me. I remember for months I would run into my mom's room and just sleep in
Really?
her bed and cry. I would see Satan coming up out of the floor, and I
How
was
old
sure
were
he was
you?
out to get me. I was 7,
Oh,
7.
wow. That's
And
just too much.
so, yeah, so that's kind of my introduction. And then when I was about 10 years old, we went to, do you remember Gorgeous George?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
the wrestler, or I think he was a wrestler. He became an evangelist, and we went to
Mhm.
this big evangelistic thing. Me, my mom, my sister. She was single at the time, still. And when we went, he talked about hell, and like he was like scaring me to death. So at the end of his thing, I like pulled both my mom and my sister, and we like ran up to the front, and then they like took us into different rooms, and we all said the prayer. And I guess that was my ticket out of hell, just saying a prayer. But I tell you, I think I said that prayer 1,000 times, throughout my life, if not more, because I just did it stick? I don't feel any different. I don't
Yes. Right.
understand what's happening. I just don't want to go to hell.
Right. Yeah.
And, but God is loving. He loves you, Leslie. So he gave you this way to not be thrown into hell. And
It's really, yeah.
yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot to carry as a young girl. And so when I went to college, I ran. I was like, no thanks. God hates me anyway because I like Pink Floyd and I wear jeans. And
No, wait a
we
minute.
had,
So you fell away in college and then you came back? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, oh yeah, I fell
Oh,
away in college and then came back. I think I was 33 when my husband and I both were like, I think, we had just had 9/11. So we were rethinking a lot of, just our family and our lives and what are we doing? And we're scared. And what if this is the end of the world? And so we started kind of doing more. I had Bible studies in my home with like a couple of women at the local church. And because I wanted to know what am I missing? And
right.
so they would come and they would teach us. And so I finally ended up surrendering my life to Jesus Christ. I don't know if you know what that means if you're
Oh,
listening,
yeah.
but
Yes,
it's
definitely.
the thing. It's the thing. And I
Right.
feel like in that moment, I really meant it. Like there was a big change in my
Mhm.
life in that moment. And um, but the thing that didn't change was the fear. It was still there.
Right.
It was disguised, and I felt like, okay, I should be fine because I'm going to heaven, right? So I'm good. I don't know why I'm so afraid. But the problem is, um, I'm such an empathetic person. I love people. Like if I
Mhm.
meet you, I love you. I mean, I am the
Mhm.
person that goes to the grocery store and I'm checking out at the
Yeah,
register,
right.
and the person checking me out is telling me their life story. Like I just love people, and I think they feel that, and so I carried a lot of sadness and fear. And I think it's why I became sort of an evangelist. Within a year of me surrendering my heart to Jesus, I was on Christian radio doing a morning show.
Really? Within a
Yeah.
year?
hmm
Wow, were you already on radio before? Is that it? And
Never
how
in my life. Here's what
really?
I
Oh,
did. This is a funny story. I've always been a talk, I love to talk. I love people. I love connection is my jam. And so there was this Regis and Kelly co-host search. I think it was 2003 when Kelly went on maternity leave. And so they had this big like casting call, and a friend of mine was like, you should do that. And I was like, what? She's like, no, you totally should do it. And so I said, well, if I call the plane, I was going to call Delta and say, okay, so if I do this, Can I is there any way I could use my miles for, even though it's like, I got to leave tomorrow, And the guy was so funny. He was like, "Are you kidding me? That's so cool. Yeah, of course. We'll get you in." So I got a free ticket, went up to New York, spent the night in the streets of New York, literally in the freezing rain. Um,
Really?
26th in line, and I was the first person selected to be a finalist for this Regis and Kelly
Really?
co-host search. Yeah. So
That's amazing.
my town kind of knew it was like a fun little Leslie might be the co-host and
Yeah.
blah blah blah.
Right, right.
I didn't make it. I think they picked a guy. I don't think I had a choice, or a chance. But because of that, there was a guy who worked at the local Christian radio station whose brother went to my church, and he said, "Oh, you go to church with that girl that was on Regis and Kelly?" And they're like, "Yeah." And so they said, "Tell her she should apply. We're looking for a morning show co-host." And so I did. I applied, and I I unbelievably was selected
So,
after a
yeah,
very
because
long time.
you went on
It
that
was
other
like a
one that
month.
you kinda had confidence to go to try out for this one. Yeah, sounds like.
Well, and I had been auditioning at this point for Survivor. I started auditioning for that
Oh,
in like
I see.
2001. So here we
Okay,
are
you
in
were
2003,
oh,
and I'm
okay.
like, I know how to audition for Survivor, but I don't know
Right,
how to audition for a radio show. So I
right,
just did a audition video because I know how to do
right,
them at this point. And they
right.
get this video and they're like, "What the heck is happening?" I was like, "I have no experience, but I love people and I love Jesus and I love to talk and I think it'd be great. I think we'd be a good team." And so they took me in and gave me a chance.
That's amazing.
Pretty cool.
So
I
I
know.
like the part you said that in college, when you fell away, you became a Pink Floyd fan.
Well, I mean, I had
I
been one for a long time. I just wasn't allowed to talk about it.
You weren't allowed
Um,
to talk, alright, but you came out of the closet and say, "I now I'm a
yeah,
Pink Floyd fan." Okay, all right.
yeah,
Well, I kinda I got into Pink Floyd too, so there we go.
yeah. Oh man, such a
So
great band. I still love them.
yeah, they're amazing.
Mm.
What was it like though during that time when you had fallen away? Did you feel guilty about it or
Oh,
what? What was going on?
yeah, I did. And what I didn't tell you is like as soon as we had, I ran up after the Gorgeous George thing with my mom and my sister. My mom was married to my stepfather, who I consider like my dad. He's amazing. But they got really into church. And then we moved to California and, church is church. So we're like, oh, this is a church. We'll go to this church. It was a fundamental Baptist church, independent, fundamental Baptist church.
Mm, mhm.
So all of a sudden, we were wearing culottes and not listening to music. We had a bonfire and burned our albums. It
Oh,
was
yeah, I did that once too, okay.
we were shown the Thief in the Night, Distant
Oh,
Thunder
man.
movies. We were,
Okay.
I mean, like the fear just kept
Yeah,
piling on when we
right,
left that church because we
right.
realized something's kind of wonky here. We left the church and we got hate mail from the people, like
Really?
anonymously, from
Now
members of the church.
now
And
how old were you at this time?
12, 12.
Oh, right, okay, yeah. That's
And
crazy.
yeah, so I didn't have a really good taste in my mouth when it came
Yeah,
to religion at this point. I was scared, and also I felt like a disappointment, like I couldn't get it right. It was very much about rules. And,
yeah,
I'm 12. I want to wear Levi's 501s. I don't want to wear culottes made at home with,
right.
navy blue
So
cotton.
so when you got back into it in your 30s, what kinda
Uh-huh.
church did you go to?
It was more of like evangelical Christian. It was a
Not
Southern
quite as
Baptist.
fundamentalist. You could wear Levi's, right?
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we could wear
Yeah,
what we wanted. They,
right.
drank coffee in the service. It was a nice little,
Yeah,
Christian church. And then, for a while we went to a Foursquare church.
mhm.
A lot of times we would just go to these non-denominational. We kind of church hopped a little bit. We would we kept having weird things happen. And I like it's hard to say, but when you're a woman and you're in evangelicalism, I guess you could say, you assume that you're the problem all the time. So I was like, is there something wrong with me? Like we went to one church and the youth pastor, it gave me weird vibes, let's just say. And ended up, I could tell he was flirting with one of the other moms. I was really uncomfortable with him. He was
Yeah,
kind of weird. So I go to with my husband, hand in hand. Like he totally covered me because, I'm a woman and I shouldn't be doing this unless my husband says
Right.
it's okay.
Yeah.
So I was like, listen, yeah, I told the pastor, this is what's happening. I'm really uncomfortable with this guy. And he didn't do anything. Well, then the guy ends up, of course, having an affair and,
Right.
then leaving and very much disgraceful like a year later. But so we left that church. Then we go to this other church and I loved this church. I'm not going to name names or whatever, but it was a great church. But then this guy just started being up at the front doing deliverance ministry. And I just got a weird vibe. So I went to the pastor. I'm like, I think something's wrong with this guy.
Yeah.
And he did nothing. Like nobody, it's like nothing happens. And so I was
Right.
like, okay, so I guess we'll go to this church, and then I'm like, what is wrong with me? I keep finding
No, no, it's not
trouble.
nothing wrong with you because that happens to a lot of people. It happened to me too. You go from one to another to another. You
Yeah. And
know,
I'm not looking for perfection, but when something feels really off, like even though
yeah,
I was kind of taught not to listen to my intuition or my heart, um, I also believed I had the gift of discernment because I
yeah,
am very discerning when it
right,
comes to
right,
people. And
right.
it's kind of, it's funny. I told my friend, I was like, I feel like this is not a gift. I don't want to know this stuff, but I feel it.
Yeah.
And, when I would try to, approach the person, it was always horrible. So then I would go to the pastor. We did everything in order, the way the Bible said to do it. And then nothing would ever get done. And so I don't know. I think I
Was
just
that
got discouraged.
was that kind of going on the same time you were on Christian radio?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, what was your experience on Christian radio? Were you having some of these questions and doubts then?
Yeah, I was. I oh, golly, this is hard to talk about. Christian radio, because I loved my job. I
Yeah.
loved the
Right.
listeners. I loved the people I worked with so much. But
Mm,
I was a woman in a man's world. It was a
mm.
boys club. And it's so hard for me to talk about it because I still want to protect. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you
Um,
mean.
and as a matter of fact, I there are things I probably won't say, but I said some things in my book that's going to be coming out. And I'm actually really I'm like getting nervous even just talking about the fact that I wrote it in my book. And I don't know what that is. That's something I still need to work out of myself that I don't want to, I remember when things would happen, I just wanted to protect the station because they were the voice of God in
Mhm.
Charlotte, North Carolina, or, wherever I was. And so, yeah, the first radio station I worked at, I just loved these people like family, just loved them like family, but had some
Right.
pretty awful experiences that showed me very quickly that things are not always what they seem. And I saw the underbelly of ministry and I fought through it by just shutting my mouth and letting it go because I was trying to protect God and protect the system. Um,
Can you give us
went
some
to another radio
examples of
station.
what you saw?
I just oh, so let's just say it's just hard to be a woman who is do you know the Billy Graham rule?
Don't talk to a woman in private unless
Yeah.
your wife is there. Yeah.
So I'm doing
Right.
a morning show with a guy and it's just the
Yeah.
two of us. And
Yeah.
I don't think he was comfortable with it. And
Yeah.
so I mean, he was 20 years my senior, sweetest guy in the world, but like he was uncomfortable with working with a woman who wasn't his wife.
Okay. All right.
And that
Okay.
was hard because I
Yeah.
didn't want people to know he was uncomfortable because I respected him so much. And I
Right.
still do. Like it's just the weirdest thing. Like it makes me want to cry even saying it because I would never want anybody to look at him in a bad way, but it's just that was
And then you went to another radio station.
yeah, and it was much better.
Yeah.
But I was going through a lot of and this was the Billy Graham station up in Asheville, North Carolina. I love these people. Like this is the thing. This is the thing that's so hard.
Yeah, you have mixed feelings about it because you
It's
do
so
love
hard.
people.
I
Right.
love
I
them so
understand
much. I
exactly what you're
still do.
saying. Yeah.
But there's just stuff that happens. And,
Mhm.
I think my life was really hard right then because we were trying to sell our house where we were and move up and my kids were not adjusting well. And I was under a lot of pressure. And, there was a guy that was like coaching me.
Mhm.
Um, and he was just not very nice. He was mean. He didn't work for the station. He was a contract. And it's like, okay, I understand. you need to grow thick skin. I get that. But like, I am literally going through hell and
Yeah.
also being told, you know, you're being too emotional. You're doing this wrong. You're not Oprah
Oh,
Winfrey. Don't give advice, you know? And I'm
I
like,
see.
I love people. Like that's the whole point of the show is to
Don't
love
give
people and to
advice. You're
listen to
not
them.
Oprah Winfrey. I like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Oh my
so
God.
I get it. I get it. I mean, maybe it didn't fit with their vision, but that's I thought why they hired
Yeah,
me
it wasn't
was
a
to be
good fit
myself.
for you, even though you love the people and you love doing what you did. It sounds like it's just.
Yeah,
But
I loved it.
what were there some when you were deep, when you were starting to questioning these things, what more than just how they treated you as a woman? Were there any other pressing doctrines or practices that you saw that really stood out that got you on the path of deconstruction?
You know, that sort of happened after I went on Survivor.
Oh,
Because
okay,
all of these things happened prior to Survivor, right? All
okay,
the
yeah,
the heartache. But I just kept saying this just shut up and protect, shut up
hmm
and protect, shut up and protect. But then man, when I went on Survivor and I came back, it was not just, I mean, it wasn't the radio station so much. It was more the listeners who I had developed relationships with who were very curious about why I made an alliance with a guy who was a gay Mormon flight attendant.
okay,
There was a lot of
mhm,
judgment. And I
yeah.
remember going through a very difficult health season and then getting these emails from listeners who thought they thought they knew me. I mean, and I had such a relationship with these listeners. I loved them so much that they would invite me to their family reunions because they felt like I was a part of the family. And
hmm
so they felt like they had every right to speak into my life no matter what I did. So when I came back, I felt like I disappointed some people. At one point, I kissed the idol that we won when we won a challenge. I was so excited. I kissed it and got slammed. And then I got slammed for going in the Buddhist temple and yeah, you came out, but you were in there. And, it just, I couldn't do anything right.
Oh, I see. You didn't do this welcoming ceremony, but you were in the temple.
Yeah. I was in the
I
temple and I was
So you
burning
weren't
incense and,
yeah, you weren't
I
oh,
had
you
my
were just
hands like this,
oh
folded
my
in
gosh.
prayer. And so there was just so much judgment. And I was like,
Yeah,
damn, I don't think I can do anything right by these people. Like if I were to
exactly.
do it one way, I would get, these
You're
people would be mad at me if I do it. And I finally just started to go, what is happening? And then because I loved this kid who was on my tribe so much, um, I and he was LGBTQ. I mean, he was a gay Mormon flight attendant,
right.
um, and he assumed that I thought he was going to hell and that I
Yeah.
would judge him. And I was like, wait, I've never been around anybody. Like, I don't know what this is like because
Yes.
when you're in the Bible Belt, if people are gay, they're not in the church. They're just not. They're not
That's
allowed.
right.
I mean,
Yes, you don't
if
know
they
them.
are, they're
Yeah.
hiding it. So I wasn't around anybody. I didn't love anybody
Mhm.
or know anybody, and so it was very. It was weird. I found all of a sudden that I was looking into those doctrines when I came back,
I
and
see. So they kinda opened up your world, it
it
sounds
did.
like. It really
And
did.
yeah,
And you
it
realized that when you with your Christian community, it was like you're walking on eggshells. You can't
constantly.
you
Yeah,
you can't do anything right. And
yeah,
that must have really opened up your mind like, "Wow, there's a whole 'nother world out here, and
yeah,
we're in a bubble."
yeah. And so I feel like that kind of started the ball rolling, and then I started to kind of look into those doctrines, and then as I'm looking at those doctrines, I'm looking at early church history, and things were starting to not make a lot of sense. So I started to kind of pull away, and then 2016, the whole the Trump, and that's when I was like, I can't agree with this.
Yeah, right.
And
That was
I
a lot.
don't know why they do. And I felt for the first time in my life, I was like, oh my gosh, if they really think that this guy is God's chosen and should represent us as not only a country, but as a church, um, what else have they taught me that
Right.
not so much true, you know?
Right.
And that's when I started looking into, I decided to pull away from church a little bit. And then we moved a couple years later to Utah. So
Oh,
yeah, now I'm living.
you're Mormons again. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
well,
Okay.
we were never Mormon, but I will tell you, moving
Oh,
here.
you were a friend of a gay Mormon. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, he actually lives here. I did not move here for him, but I'm glad he's here. Yeah, but we moved to Utah, and for me, it was like, oh, I can breathe. Like I don't have to play the game anymore. I was still sort of protecting God and protecting His people, and I think one of the reasons I even left the church for a while was because I wanted to protect them from me because I was having questions and doubts.
Yeah.
And it feels. I was talking to Angela Harrington about this, and she was like, "It felt really good about you. Felt so righteous, but really, you were just indoctrinated, into y- you didn't matter. They did. Like
Yeah.
you and so that was really really hard for me to sort of be there and have these doubts. So it was great. I felt like God brought me to the wilderness, you know, to be able to wrestle with this stuff, and I did for 5.5 years. Just
Wow. Yeah. I
wrestled.
mean, when I think about it, I deconstructed many years ago, probably more than 20 years ago, started to, and you just did it it seemed like you did it very quickly. I mean, it's just like you said 2016 and then for 5 years, and now you've got a podcast and you're writing a book about it. And right.
Well,
So
you know
you,
what I did though, Michael, and here's the cool thing. I think for the first time in my life, I'm a talker. I love to communicate. I'm a connector. I took 5 years, almost 6 years to not talk to anybody. I didn't
yeah,
talk to anybody about it. I mean, maybe two people.
right.
I didn't even talk to my husband about it because I thought he's not going to believe that I'm feeling this way, but I was listening
Did
to
you stop going
podcasts.
to church at that time?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I tried a couple of times, but both times it literally made me nauseous.
Yeah.
And so then I was thinking, "Oh gosh, I must have a demon."
Yeah.
Maybe,
Yeah, I
you
know,
know,
I know.
maybe
Yeah.
there's something darkness and light don't mix, and the reason you're upset is because, you're
Yeah.
being influenced by Satan. But I decided instead of going to church, I was going to spend time alone with God, and I was going to get to know God for myself. And I listened to podcasts that I was told not to listen to, like Rob Bell. And
What?
I know, I
Leslie,
know. I
you
got all
listen
his
to Rob
books.
Bell?
Well, he made more sense to me than anybody else. And
Well, that's the thing.
I,
We're not taught to think for ourselves. So when you
mm-mm.
get out of that bubble, you go, "Oh, I'm gonna start thinking for myself." And you find these people, hey, they actually make a lot of sense.
Well, it's the thoughts that I was having. And it's like people probably will think, oh, well, she just went from believing these people to believing the. No, no, no. Here's what I did. I said, I want to find somebody who's saying things that resonate with me,
Yeah.
that feel true to me. And I was starting to listen to my intuition again. I was starting to, you know, really just dig I just really wanted to understand. So I listened to every perspective, without fear. I said, I'm tired of just
Yeah.
hearing that, when you tell people in evangelicalism that you are having doubts and questions about certain theologies, the first thing they say is, "Are you in church? Are you in fellowship? Are you in the Bible? Are you
Are
in a
you
Bible
reading? Are
study?"
you having your quiet time every
Yes,
morning, Leslie?
because clearly you're not, or,
Yeah. Right.
but all that does is reinforce the belief.
Yeah.
It because it's scientific if you think about it. It's like, the neural pathways widen the more information. So of course that's going to work, you know?
Right.
But instead I went in a different direction to see for myself
Yeah.
because
Right.
a
That's
lot of the
good.
things didn't make sense.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned you studied Christian history. What did you discover there?
Oh my goodness. Well, okay, one of the things I did when I started my deconstruction process, which by the way, I had no idea that's what it was called. But I wrote out a list of everything that scared me. And here's
Mhm.
why, because I was actually reading the Bible, in First John, and it says there's no fear in perfect love because perfect love casts out fear, and fear
Mhm.
has to do with punishment. And so
Right.
I sat back and I went, are you joking me? Like everything I've done has been out of fear. So what have I been experiencing? It's not perfect love. If it was
Mhm.
perfect love, it would be casting all this out, not bringing it in. And so I made a list of everything that I was afraid of in my faith tradition. Satan, hell, the rapture, uh, you know, even penal substitutionary atonement. I was afraid of
Sure.
it because
Yeah.
that meant that, well, to be honest, having struggled with my father growing up and not really having that love, it kind of sucked to learn that God really did. He loved me, but he really couldn't stand to look at me. So I had to have the blood of Jesus over me so that when he
Yeah.
looks at me, he only sees Jesus. So basically, it's not me. He doesn't care about me. He
Yeah.
cares about Jesus.
Well, and also the other angle is he can't really forgive you unless
Yeah.
Jesus is tortured and murdered. Then
It all scared me.
God will be appeased, and now I can forgive you.
So I wrote down this list of fears. And then I
Yeah.
looked into the early church. I was like, okay, none of this was in the original doctrine. Like
Yeah.
it, like the even I mean, I even started to rethink Satan. Like
Mhm.
I was like, what if? And I allowed myself to think these things, and it felt
Right.
I as I was thinking them, like the anxiety was lifting and the
Mhm.
fear was going.
Mhm.
What if Satan is just that part of myself that is bent towards evil and I have personified it so that I don't have to take personal responsibility for the bad things I do. No, the devil made me do it,
Yeah.
and so I went back and I literally read the Bible with that lens and it made sense.
That's
Like
amazing.
when
Yeah.
Jesus was up in the wilderness and being tempted, did somebody actually come and sit with him, or was he wrestling with that human side of him that wanted,
Yes.
you know what I mean? Like,
That's a good
is
question.
Satan a
Yeah.
real person, a real being? And I would have never been allowed to ask this question. That would,
That's right.
for some
Yeah.
reason, that makes you a heretic.
Yeah, yeah, you're asking too many questions. Well, we're gonna take a short break right now. We're talking with Leslie Nease, talking about her journey, and we'll be right back. All right, we're back with Leslie Nease, and I'm really excited to hear this journey of yours. It's fascinating to hear people's stories,
Yeah.
and you understand the way to understand deconstruction and rebuilding a faith is to hear people's stories.
Mhm.
The way to understand anything, you met someone in the gay community who was a Mormon. To understand their perspective, you meet them, you get to know them. That's the way you understand. And so many times evangelicalism, they don't want to understand. They don't want to get to know people. They just want to, make a judgment about something just based on your what you believe or what you don't believe, right? So
Right.
I'm really glad that you're getting into some of this, and some of the things that you're talking about is relationships and so forth,
Mm.
and how um, getting outside the evangelical bubble helped you see things in a new light, a new paradigm, and then you started working through it yourself, doing your own study. You just didn't wake up, afterward and say, "Okay, uh, it's official. I am now."
I am on the other side of
I'm
this.
on the other
No, no,
side. No, you
no,
have
no,
you
no.
go through a process, and you're learning and you're questioning, but you're free to do it because you set yourself free. You gave yourself permission to do it.
Right.
And that sounds like that really helped.
Well, and it's funny because like I think when I first started, I was like, all right, because the doubts were so heavy. I was like, I am just gonna step outside for a minute, step
Yeah.
outside of the boat of evangelical Christianity and do a little research and then I'll come right back in. Like
Oh, I see.
I just needed to just shut
Yeah.
myself up.
Yeah.
So
So
my
that it kinda shows the sincerity. Your
yeah,
sincerity was, my goal was not to leave. It
no.
was just to get grounded and then
Yes.
come back.
Yes.
So what
And
happened? How come you didn't do that?
well, I did the research and I realized that most of the things that I was afraid of were not initially even in, church doctrine, that most of the people in the original church were universalists.
Right.
There was no mention of hell. And the way that, I did, oh golly, I can't even tell you how many books I read about hell. And really did my research on could this not be true, you know,
Right.
because when I realized I don't think I believe in hell anymore, there was 1,000 pounds lifted off of me. Like it
Yes, that
was,
happens. Yep.
oh, thank God. You mean I can live like this? This is
Yeah.
amazing.
No,
Um,
that's
and
true.
so and the crazy thing is when I started to realize, you know, these things that I was so afraid of, like penal substitutionary atonement didn't even come about until what, the 1600s, I think.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
and then
you could argue the 11th century with Anselm, but then 16th century Calvin was the one
right,
who really, finished it, yeah,
finished it
completed the
off.
whole doctrine.
Well, and
Right.
then the rapture, which terrified me. You know, I didn't want to get my head chopped off, and you know, that terrified me. Wasn't even a thing until the 1800s. You know, by
Yeah,
John
right,
Nelson
right.
Darby. So
Yeah.
the more research I did, and these are not things that we're taught to do. We're like, if it's not in the Bible, it doesn't matter. And I'm like, yeah, but like this is literal church history. And then doing research on the Bible. You know,
Yes.
reading books about the Bible. I read so many books. Like Pete Enns has been
Yeah.
such a
Mhm,
gift to me
mhm.
just to help
Yes.
me understand the Bible and why it was written and who it was written for and the, you know, the different meanings behind certain things, and it helped me to let go of my fear. Of the ultimate fear was my fear of God. And you
Yeah,
know,
because he was an angry, punitive God that you had been
yeah,
taught, so of
he
course we're
was going
afraid
to
of
throw
him.
me into
Yeah.
hell,
Right.
you know, if I messed up. And more than that, like he would throw my kids into hell. And
Mhm.
I just didn't, it scared me to death. And now I have, you know, I made a choice, Michael. I just made a choice. If it doesn't back up love,
Yes.
I'm not going to believe it anymore. And call me a hippie, call me a, you know, well, what about the justice of God? And what about the, we're supposed to fear God? That's the beginning of wisdom. Okay, well, that means respect. And I do respect God. I respect him enough, or her. I respect God enough to get my butt out of my comfort zone and find out for myself who God is.
Yeah.
And I lost my community. I lost my job. I lost respect. People don't respect me anymore.
That's a Yeah, that's a really good point because, I mean, who would choose this? "Oh, I think I'm gonna sign up for this
No,
deconstruction stuff and lose my job," and a
it was
lot of
my life.
family and friends turn against you, right? I mean, yeah, you just
It's very difficult, and I didn't take it lightly, and I'm not on a slippery slope. This is a mountain I'm climbing. This is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I mean,
Yeah.
I literally went against everything that meant everything to me. You know what I
No,
mean? And
yeah.
I did it because it was scaring the crap out of me, and I was
Yeah.
not happy.
Yeah, right, and it's freeing. You're free to pursue this. And like you said, this is the hardest thing. I mean,
Yeah,
again, why are people? I mean, we're deconstructionists are accused of like you're doing this for selfish reasons, right?
right.
No,
No,
this is a difficult thing to do, and it's and you have to do it. You're driven because it's like you said, at some point there's an epiphany.
yeah,
Wait a minute, this should be based on love. Wait a minute, the history says otherwise. Wait a minute, the Bible is actually mistranslated here, and we've misinterpreted it here, etc.
yeah,
And and then you're like, wait, this is what I should be pursuing,
hmm,
right? And then you're driven to do it, even though people come against you, they oppose you, you might lose your job, especially if you're in ministry or a Christian radio
right,
station, whatever,
yeah,
and it's very difficult, and there's turmoil. Was your
so
husband
much.
going through this the same time?
Well, my husband, he's not nearly as he's not a thinker the way I am. Like I
Mhm.
am very emotional and empathetic, and I overthink things. You know what I mean? I tend to be that
Yeah,
one in the
right.
relationship. He never really bought into the whole thing. Like I remember trying to get him to lead me. You need to lead me better and you need to do that. And he's like, you're so much better at this than me. Please stop. Like why, you know, I'm like, but the Bible says, you know, and the pastor says, and you need to do this. And so I really put a lot of pressure on the poor guy. But he, you know, all he saw was how I was treated in ministry. He saw, and he's so protective of me. He
So he
saw
was protective, yeah,
very protective. He was like,
right.
he said long before I ever even realized it. In his mind, he was like, "This is bull crap. Like, no.
Okay, so he realized it beforehand, but
And he would
for
never
other
tell me that.
Oh, I
He
see.
wouldn't,
Okay.
because my husband is very
Yeah.
smart. He's so smart. He was like, "I know her. She's gonna figure this out. I don't have to say a word."
Oh, okay.
Meanwhile, I'm trying to, like, not tell him what I'm going through.
Oh, wow.
And he's
I
like,
see.
he's already been through it. He's just, so when I finally
Wow.
told him, he goes, "Yeah, I've been there for a while."
That's great. I'm glad you could do that.
Yeah,
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 it makes a huge difference when your spouse is on the same page.
it
So
does.
let's pivot a little bit
Mhm.
here. Tell us about your faith shift or and deconstruction coaching work. What do you do? How do you help people?
It's actually, I absolutely love it. It's an opportunity to walk beside somebody who's going through the process that I've gone through. And I think I knew pretty early on that I would want to do that because it was hard to do that alone for so long. Not only was I in a new community with a very different religion as the dominant religion, so I'm far away from where I was, don't have anybody to walk through with me. And I remember thinking I would just give anything if there was somebody I could talk to. And I do
Right.
remember I called Gary Allen Taylor once. Well, we talked on the phone once, and I was like, I feel like I'm supposed to share. I feel like, but I just, like, I'm scared. I don't want to do the same thing, just in a different vein. But I feel like this is a lonely process, and there are people that need to process it with another person, maybe verbally. And so I knew, and so I, of course, started to get my certification last year, and just decided this is what I want to do. I want to walk with people, and what I do is I have free consultation. We make sure that it's a good fit, and then we meet and we set up a plan of the things that they are really wanting to work through.
Mhm.
And I give them homework. There's things that
Yeah.
they do, and
Mhm.
when they do it and they start to see, the things, these are all things that they've discovered in themselves too. It's not like I'm like, here's my prescription, you're going to do this.
Right.
If this is what you're looking to do with your life, if this is what you want to work through, here's some steps to do that. But you got to get real with yourself, and it's deep, and it's hard, but it's beautiful. And I tell you, one of the best things that happens is when somebody, like, I see the light come on,
Yeah.
and they're starting to lose the fear. They're starting to trust their heart again. They're starting to understand what intuition is. They're starting to, like, not be afraid of, whatever. Or some people really struggle with, how do I tell my family about this?
Yeah.
And
So
so,
when you engage with these people, are they mostly right in the middle of deconstruction towards the end or what?
well, I don't think there is an end, Michael. I think you're in it, I think, for the rest of your life, and that's the
Yeah.
joy of it. I think it's
Well, what I
fun.
mean by the end, I mean like getting that epiphany, like,
Yeah.
oh, I can paradigm shift here.
Most of the people that I talk to, I would say a good 80% of them are just, they're at the point where they can't take it much more to not say something. So
Yeah.
they really want to work through, how do I do this without
Do
hurting people, and how do I do this? And,
right.
and usually the answers are in you. You just need the right questions to get it out.
Exactly. Right.
And it also depends on the people and where they're at. And so a lot of it is also understanding why people believe what they believe, and understanding the psychology of it, and not taking it personal.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah,
a healing journey. It's beautiful,
it is.
and it's a
So
forward journey.
how do they find you?
Well, I have a website, leslieneasecoaching.com. They can find me there. I also have a podcast called Honoring the Journey, where we share journeys of people going through deconstruction, or I sometimes just bring somebody on who is a different religion. And so we get a different perspective and get to hear where they're coming from. So we're not so afraid to
So let
hear.
so you're at your person who's like, okay, I got to talk to someone about this. They don't know about your website. They don't know your name.
Mhm.
I don't know where they're in a church, or maybe they're a Christian college student or something. How do they end up finding
How
someone
did
like you?
it's, I always, that's one of the first questions I ask people. How did you hear about me?
Yeah.
And most of them, it's interesting. They're like, well, I listened to your podcast. I heard your
Okay.
podcast. So
Right.
it's great. I mean, that's a good way to do it. Or also, I work with a couple of people who are, they were friends uh, kids, people who I used to walk with, who are like, it's so nice that there's a mom from my past who is on this journey.
Oh, I
And
see.
so, it's hard. I
Yeah,
think a
right.
lot of people in their 50s are kind of, they've got their heels dug in, they're not changing. They
Yeah,
believe what they believe, and so for me to be at this place of, I could have been wrong, and
yeah,
I'm starting this journey. I think it's refreshing for the younger generation to have sort of like a mentor to talk to and to talk through these
right,
things with. So a
right.
lot of them, they knew me before, and you would not believe how many people, in ministries I've worked in and in communities that I've been in, who are reaching out to me privately and, personally, um, and just saying, you're saying things that I've been thinking, but I just don't know what to do with any of it.
Yeah, that's great.
And
That's
so that's how people, I mean, it's kismet, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how people find me, but like I'm trying my best to get my voice out there to, connect with these people. I call them invisibles. They're on the internet, but they don't want anybody to know what they're doing because
the
there's
Invisibles.
yes,
Yes,
the invisibles. I love the
right,
invisibles so
right.
much. It's why I do
Yeah,
what I do. And
right.
I just it's that voice, that evangelical like condemnation is
Mhm.
so relentless. And so my hope is to bring just some hope and some grace to these people who are probably not only being ostracized in their communities if they're being vocal about it, but who are also doing that to themselves. Like, that self-doubt, it's just baked
Right,
into
right.
that whole
So
thing.
so when you, work with someone who they've been condemned by the church, evangelical church, they have the doctrine of hell over their head, they haven't maybe, you know, studied church history like you have, but they have all these doubts and these red flags.
Mhm.
What do you do to point them in a better direction to find answers themselves?
Well, first of all, if they're really struggling with trauma, I always say, I want to work with you, but I really want you to be in therapy too, because therapy is different. Therapy
Yeah.
is going to deal with the whys of the before, the past, and kind of help heal that. Coaching is more about what's next. And
Okay.
so, in conjunction with therapy, coaching can be incredibly healing because it's forward thinking. And I think sometimes when we're just in that trauma, it's hard to
Mhm.
think forward. You're just overwhelmed with the right now, and it feels like so much. So, giving people, I mean, there's even a scripture, without vision, the people perish. And I believe that's true. We need to have vision, and we need to know, what are the steps I can take that are a forward way for this, and how can I stay healthy as I do it. And it's just so different for each person. um, it's not a prescription. It is actually very individualized and personal for each participant.
Right. No, that's great. We'll definitely be putting some information in the show notes so people who have listened to this podcast can find you.
Yes.
And I think that's and also your podcast, as well as I think you have a book coming up, but that's not for a few
You.
months, right? What's the
Well,
title of the book?
actually, the title is Honoring the Journey, and then the
Uh-huh.
subtitle is The Deconstruction of Sister Christian, because that's what they called me on
Oh,
Survivor.
oh, they called you Sister Christian.
They
Okay.
voted me out, Sister Christian.
Oh, that's great. Okay.
Yeah,
That's a great subtitle. All right.
yeah, and
Okay.
it's actually, I'm finished with it. They're just people who are reading it, to
Who
give me feedback, and,
do you have a
yeah.
publisher?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Who's
I'm
your
going through
publisher?
Choir Publishing.
Well, of course. That's my
Yes,
publisher.
I know.
Of
It's
course.
good.
I should have
It's
known
the
that.
best. Yeah, I love it. It's so fun. And I'm
Right,
also
right.
working, if you're interested, we have this amazing Facebook group through choir called the Choirlings.
Yes, yes, I know
QU,
that. Yep.
yeah, QUOIRLINGS.
Mhm.
If you look for that, we go through a book each month about deconstruction. So it's a private community
Oh,
with
nice.
people going through deconstruction. And the best thing is, like, each month when we go through this book together, there are discussion questions from the author. And we do, like last night, we just did the one for April. We do a Facebook Live with the author of the book.
Nice.
So it's super fun. If anybody listening is interested in joining, I'm the tour guide for the
Okay, the choir
choirlings.
link. So we'll put
Yeah.
that in the show notes too.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. So, just a little bit about your podcast, Honoring the Journey. It's fairly new. What's your
Mhm.
goal in your podcast?
My goal is to break down walls of judgment and fear and just listen to people's stories. I learned so much in my 5.5 years of silence, is what it felt like, just quiet, where I just listened. And sometimes all you need to hear is a new perspective. Doesn't mean you have to believe it, but when you start to see how many different perspectives are in the world, you start to realize how narrow, that view of our way is the only way. It just doesn't make sense anymore. So listening to other stories and different cultures and different religions and why people are leaving religion, it to me is very healing. And so as I'm being healed by it, I'm hoping it's healing others who are listening. And that's what we
Good.
do. We share those
Yeah,
stories.
that's really important,
Hmm.
especially understanding different cultures and religions.
Hmm.
I worked with Muslims in Africa for 7 years. Boy, did that open up my mind.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
the evangelical church was telling me, "Hey, they're going to hell unless you convert them." It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah. And
so
that's, I mean, travel is fatal to prejudice. That's what Mark
yeah,
Twain
right.
said. And that's one
Yes,
of my favorite quotes because it
right,
is so true. Coming
right.
out here to Utah from the Bible Belt, learning and growing and just listening, it really helped me in my healing journey. So,
Yeah, right. No, that's very important. So, another question I had, is where are you spiritually today?
mm,
And how do you share I mean, another sub question, maybe two-part question.
yeah, yeah.
Where have you landed today spiritually? I know we're still deconstructing, I get that.
Yeah, forever. I think
But
one of
that's
the
not a
things,
that doesn't mean that doesn't to me, that doesn't mean, tomorrow Leslie's gonna wake up and be a Muslim or something. I mean,
no.
you're kind of in a trajectory, but you're still deconstructing.
Mhm.
And then the other follow-up question is how do you share your new spiritual self with your former evangelical friends and family?
Mm, okay. Well, I would say where I'm at right now, and this is the thing, I've learned to sort of hold it loosely. I used to cling for dear life to my beliefs. They, defined me. They were everything. They inspired, they made me want to save the world. It was just so I was so certain. And now that um, I'm not so certain. It's actually very freeing in a weird way. But
Mhm,
where I stand right now, and it could change.
mhm.
I think I definitely believe in God still, or the divine. I think it's not a man with a beard up in heaven. You know, um, I, I I believe the way that I see God now is so much bigger and so much more
Yeah,
brilliant. Like
right.
God is the soil that I am planted in, but
Mhm.
also the air that I breathe, and also inside of me, the essence of who I am. And I feel like I'm at a point now where I'm so done with the separation theology. I don't believe that that's a thing. I don't think you would be alive and breathing if you were separated from your life source, which is God. So I
Yeah,
believe everyone has, God in there. And I think, to me, I feel like the Jesus came to show us that, so I
yeah.
do still really believe in Jesus. I believe Jesus came to say, hey guys, guess what? You're connected to God. The kingdom of God is in you. The kingdom of God is in you and it's here. And like, you don't have to work for it. Like, it's there. And
Mhm.
and I feel like what we have done, we have made the kingdom of God, which is really the essence of God. We've made that a place that we go when we die. And
Right.
and because of that, I felt like there was really not a lot of joy in my life because
Mhm,
I am not of this world. I am just passing through. I am a sojourner. This is not my home.
mhm.
You lose personal responsibility for taking care of the earth. You lose joy because nobody matters unless they're going to heaven with you. It's all about that destination and not the journey. And
No, true.
now I'm enjoying the journey, and I can't even tell you. Like, it blows my mind how much love, life, and light is out there, beyond the church walls. I thought it was all confined.
Oh, that is a very good point. Yeah, and that's something I discovered too. I mean, yeah, we have the have this us versus them
Yeah,
mentality, and we're the ones that have the answers. We know best. We follow the Bible, and they don't.
yeah,
And but then you realize when you get out of it, you realize, wait a minute, I'm
yeah,
in a bubble. There is so much wisdom out there. There's so much love out there. There's actually people who aren't Christians who are extremely loving people,
yeah.
and they're not, we dehumanize people who are on
We
the
do.
outside. And so when you get to that point, and then you can love everyone
It's the
equally.
best. Yeah.
And I mean, you can't love everyone exactly equally.
No, but
You don't have time, but you
right.
can love them the same way,
Yeah.
and you don't have to worry about this, "Oh, I need to convert them.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
I
not trying
need
to
to
change.
they're going to hell. They
Yeah.
might be going to hell," or, all these other things.
Well, and I
They're
have
not
to
they're not
be.
living the right life. They're in
Yes.
sin. They're not right. So
And I
all
have
this
to be
stuff.
so careful because coming out of us versus them, I don't wanna step right back into it, like
Yeah,
us
and that's the
versus
other thing.
them, the evangelical,
We could become
I
a
love them too.
deconstructionist or a progressive
Yeah.
Christian can easily be a fundamentalist variety,
Mhm.
because it's kind of human nature. Oh, we're just going to divide the world like that.
Right.
So
And it's
I
hard.
yeah, I came up with a phrase recently. I said we're all on the same team, even though some of us don't show up for practice. We're on the same team.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like I because I have spoken that language, I guess you could say, I get why they feel the way they feel. So I think understanding them as human beings is just as important, as understanding other faiths or people who are deconstructed.
Oh,
I really
absolutely.
I
Yeah,
understand and I love them and I want nothing but good. I just as long, I just feel like it's causing a lot of harm. And that's not the people, it's the system. And I think people are starting to wake up to that. And I'm hoping
yeah,
to be one of the voices that shows that you can love people and still love Jesus and still believe in God,
right,
and not be in the walls of a church or in a system
right,
of the church. As much as I say I don't want to be in a system, I am. We all are. We can't help it. I'm probably in more of a deconstruction system or whatever,
right.
but I'm holding it all so loosely. And if I wake up tomorrow and I'm like convicted and I feel like, this is where I need to go in this direction, I'm going to do it. But I feel like I'm going in the right direction right now
Yeah,
for
right.
myself.
That's right. And you made a really good point too, where you discovering that love is really a good guideline
Yeah.
for wherever you're going.
It's
And
not
that's
it's not rocket science. It's
yeah,
not that deep.
it's
It's
not that
just
deep.
yeah, it's just
So
what it
so how
is.
about the second part of the question?
I want to share.
How do you share your spiritual self with people who are still evangelicals, or your family that are still in the church?
Well, and that's been really hard for me. I am just trying to put my voice out there. And I think the podcast is part of that. Like I think it's a way for people to be able to hear what's going on
Yeah,
from me,
right,
without having to have that conversation that not a lot of people want to have.
right.
I have had some people reach out to me and help me understand why you feel this way, and I will be very honest and open.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
I'm having some really good conversations with some very evangelical people, you know,
Mhm.
but they're listening. And
Yeah,
and I will listen as well. And so I think that is my way to say I understand that this is hard for you. I so get it. I understand why it's so hard for them. It would have been hard for me 10 years ago, to see somebody I love going through this, and I would think they were going to hell. And so all the fear. And I think that's the biggest and hardest thing for me is I don't want to add to the fear. I don't want to make somebody afraid. I don't want to be a source of sadness or fear or anything. Um, but there are some people that just aren't talking to me,
yeah, I know, that's
and
hard.
that's okay. I
Yeah,
understand. I
yeah,
have a great community. I have people that I can talk to. When they're ready, I'm here, and they may never be, and that's
yeah,
okay.
right,
Some
you have to accept that,
well,
but
and
it's
some
hard
people
be
some people believe so hard and so deeply in what they believe, like people who I love and who are in my family. I don't talk to them at all about it
Yeah,
because
you can't.
to
Right.
me, that's like I said, I don't want to be a source of sadness
Yeah,
or
that's the
it's
hard part
respect.
because on the one hand, you don't want to be a source of, pain for them, anxiety. Oh, Leslie just reminded me how terrible, what a heretic she is.
Well, and just
And then on the
loving
other
people.
hand, you don't want them to be in that bubble where they are being harmed and they have spiritual anxiety of some sort, and they don't see the freedom of getting out of it.
It's so hard, and it's an individual basis, but it's kind of like what I told you about my theology. Like if it's not love based,
Yes.
toss it. And it's the same with these people in
Right.
my life. Like I know certain people are going to talk to me, and it's going to be the pink elephant in the room forever and ever, and I'm okay with that because to me, I'm protecting them by letting them believe, and I feel like when they're ready, they'll ask. And if they're
Yeah,
never
they can
ready,
ask
that's
questions.
okay. You don't
Right,
have
and that's
to.
yeah. Well, this is good. We've had a great conversation. I'm so glad that we got to be on each other's podcasts.
I
So
know. So fun. So fun.
so we'll post this and maybe post yours up next to it. Who knows?
Yeah.
But folks, I'll put in the show notes Leslie's website where you can find out more about her faith, deconstruction coaching, and also she does life coaching as well.
Mhm.
And also, there's going to be information about her book that's coming out. And what was the other thing? Now I forgot what it was. Um,
The
the
pod
the podcast,
Yeah, the
having
pod
the podcast in the link too.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
so all right. Well, thanks again, Leslie, for joining us and on the Spiritual Brew Pub.
Of course.
And we'll connect again
Yeah,
very soon.
I'm
And
sure.
folks, until next time, enjoy responsibly.